Shout out to all Root Nation family, reclassified original organic tribe. When you arrive, you're the tribe. We got you. So I wanted to give public notice, and I'm going to read today to you on October 25, 2024, a writ just responding to the Colorado Combined Courts that we had initially challenged jurisdiction on October 3rd. We noticed some fraudulent issues vis-a-vis some documentation and summons. And so when I read this, I know you all can't see the paperwork, the documents, but when I read this, what happened for me this morning was I looked at the summons and I pointed it out with Christopher, my husband, and Chief Rising Sun, Chief on the land. He's going through his rite of passage right now, and we are going through our rite of passage right now because we have really had to work together as a team and as a tribe and a family. And I can explain to you the original situation that triggered the court to pursue it was actually a very silly case that they should have dismissed. So the first thing we did was just request dismissal because it's silly and it's fraudulent. I mean, the claim itself, the initial case itself is fraudulent. So he is completely innocent. And we were just like, hey, dismiss this. And they were like, no way. The DA was like, well, there's no way I'm dismissing it. So they came for us. That's all I can say. I don't know why. It seems really odd, but when you're chosen, I think you know it, and it's in an odd way that you realize that. It's not because, the angels come down out the clouds and woo, you're the chosen. It's through something that usually looks like some sort of punishment. And it's just in the way, just in the way and annoying, and something that we don't really feel like we should have even had to address. But apparently, the court has chosen us to address this matter. So we are now doing so. And we're grateful. We really are. I know I am. The learning curve for me just shot up when they came for my tribe. I'm sorry to say that, but that is where the true burst of all the information that I had, and all the law that I came here knowing, and all the work that I've done so far, it just came together and aggregated, and everything turned on and started firing for me as far as matriarchal duties and making sure that my home is a sacred place where everyone within my tribe is protected. You're in my tribe, then we acknowledge you in your rightful status, right? In your rightful status. We'll do the genealogical work with you. We'll help get you to that, initial ancestor. We'll help you see that you've not been on a ship unless it was at will, right? We will help you uncover your birthright and know who you are. So, and we've had to do that for ourselves and our extended family members. So we have the matriarchs who have been notified, and this is public notice to everyone that's been reclassified of the original organic tribes of the land. We want you to know that this is your case, and you are invited to go ahead and get your genealogical evidence ready, because this is the case that Colorado would like to be, I guess, Colorado does have a sordid history, mind you. You can look it up at what they've done to the indigenous people. So, and mind you, they're very, very new. And this is not necessarily Colorado, the place, so I don't want to put a feasant light on that. It is actually the people of the state of Colorado, which is a corporate entity. So we're going to get into that. So let's go ahead and just start reading. Subject.
You know that you're a goddess, girl. You got to know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within. You know that you're a goddess, girl. You gotta know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within. You know that you're a goddess, girl. You got to know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within you. In you. You're a goddess inside, you better unwrap the goddess within you. In you, got a goddess inside, you better unwrap the goddess within you. Unwrap the goddess within. Unwrap the goddess within. Unwrap the goddess within.
I'm actually going to record this one more time. October 25th, 2024. Good afternoon, Sherry. Due to limited funding for certified mail this month, I'm reaching out via the email listed on the website, hoping this communication reaches you. We will drop it in the mail next week. It appears there is significant confusion within the court regarding jurisdiction. This message is an attempt to clarify that confusion as directly and plainly as possible so that any party or member of the public can fully understand the matter at hand. Please remember Christopher Washington represents himself, sui juris, under common law, reserving all birthrights. I am his matriarchal advocate. Thereby, he should not be held to the standards of legal fiction officials such as foreign barristers or esquire. Let's define the terms clearly and address what I perceive to be the contract you believe grants you authority to deny Aboriginal American jurisdiction as suggested in your recent communication. Additionally, we must address the initial fraud, an act with no statute of limitations, even within your own jurisdiction, dating back to 1452 and the Romanus Pontifex. I will make very evident what you are doing by definition. Aboriginal, Black Laws Dictionary, 4th edition. Aboriginal, adjective, of or pertaining to the indigenous or earliest known inhabitants of a land or country, native. In a legal context, this often refers to the original inhabitants of territories prior to colonization. American, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. American, noun. Originally a term for the copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now it is a term applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Europeans are Europeans. Americans are copper-colored people of these lands who predate your jurisdiction. While it may be odd to learn this, it is the truth. Christopher cannot be party to your fraud once noticed, and he is enlightening you of it respectfully. Here it is. You are assuming possession of the people you found here, converting us into blacks under color of law to claim our estates for Rome, effectively disinheriting us. You claim custody of our estates by using our bodies as corpses and fictions within an imaginary jurisdiction. Your summons acts as the vessel, the slave ship instrument. You have trafficked a man from a living being into a subject, then ens legis, then black, and finally into a defendant, all on one instrument, manifest. You then sign the summons asserting that the subject's slave's status is the probable cause for finding the black guilty. If you wish to proceed, you are required to provide the purchase receipt of this alleged African slave, proving subject matter jurisdiction over his soul. Black, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, black, adjective, a word used in a legal context to describe people of African descent. In the common law context, black was historically associated with persons deemed not free, slaves, or persons of color. African, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, African, adjective, noun, of or pertaining to Africa, used in a legal context to refer to persons who originate from Africa or have African ancestry. So you know people's ancestry on site here. Wow. Note, the term Africa was first used by the Romans around the 1st century BCE to describe the northern part of the continent that they conquered, which was not named Africa. Specifically, the region that is present-day Tunisia, they called this region Africa Terra, which means land of the Afri. The use of a Roman-owned root race to identify Christopher Washington proves you are not his jurisdiction. It is evident that the basis of your assumed jurisdiction is derived from the Romanus Pontifex and similar decrees which sought to reclassify indigenous peoples into Roman subjects, or at worst, erase their inherent heritability through fraudulent racial categorization. The summons deliberately omits Christopher Washington's status as American, a noun that signifies inherent sovereignty tied to the land. Instead, it relies on adjectives like black, reducing him to a legal descriptor historically used to undermine autonomy, thereby denying his birthright and rightful standing as a sovereign being predating any colonial jurisdiction. Black's Law Dictionary, color of law, is defined as noun, the appearance or semblance, without the substance, of legal right. Acts done under the color of law are those that are carried out with the appearance of legal authority, but may actually violate the law. Present allegations. Your current actions constitute an attempt to traffic Christopher Washington from his birthright and nation, seemingly to extort currency from his estate through fraudulent charges, effectively marking his estate as abandoned and reducing him to black chattel property under color of law. This approach is not only profoundly problematic, but also reveals a fundamental incapacity to recognize his true status and the legitimate standing of his nation. Your dismissal of his nation's right demonstrates a lack of authority to manage his estate or make any legitimate legal claims. Remove this improper mark from his name and recognize him in his rightful status. Key points for clarification and resolution. 1. Case number inconsistency. There are discrepancies in the case numbers on different docs, including the notice cover sheet received yesterday. 2024 M005010 versus 2024 M5010. This inconsistency creates confusion about the validity of any actions taken under these numbers. Clarification is requested to confirm which case number is accurate and the reason for any discrepancy. Unrelated case associations. A search using case number 2024 M5010 brought up unrelated individuals, specifically Timothy Bryant and Chloanne Lehner, who have no connection to Christopher Washington. The court must explain why it is linking these names to Christopher Washington's case. If there is no connection, this is a significant procedural error that must be corrected immediately. 3. Denial of submissions. The court sent a copy of the CCF 102 proposed order to recognize Root Nation with a denied stamp on that page, but failed to include the over 25-page submission that accompanied it. Clarify if the denial pertains solely to the cover page or extends to the entire submission. A failure to address the content fully and transparently suggests an evasion of accountability. Please provide a denial that includes all pages submitted to confirm your denial of international treaties and the application of the Supremacy Clause. Missing acknowledgement of motion to dismiss. The initial motion to dismiss filed on 10/2/2024 has not been acknowledged in any responses from the court. let us know if you need another copy of that record stamped by your office. Clarification is required on the status of this motion and why it has been ignored. Legal and constitutional frameworks. Fraud vitiates all contracts. The fraudulent classification of Christopher Washington's race as B, black, under the color of law directly violates both common law and the U.S. Constitution. His race is human, of the original hue, men, indigenous to this realm called Earth. Black is not a race, it is a status that legally translates to slave. Please clarify why you classify Christopher Washington as your subject and slave, as indicated by your summons, which inherently nullifies itself by attempting to reduce a living man to a dead entity under your corporation's possession. Christopher Washington has explicitly stated his non-consent to this classification. By denying his assertion, you appear to be attempting to enslave and traffic a living, sovereign soul through an inferior statutory jurisdiction. Please identify the legitimate contract that substantiates your claim to authority over him. Note that any reliance on a fraudulent contract is invalid, as it nullifies itself. The original fraud initiated by your papal bulls has vitiated all subsequent contracts and claims of jurisdiction over Aboriginal peoples, rendering them void ab initio. Your denial of Christopher Washington's assertion of his birthright is not only an extension of his historic fraud, but also a direct violation of natural law, common law, and international treaties that protect the inherent sovereignty of indigenous nations. Black's Law Dictionary states that any agreement tainted by fraud is null from inception. Therefore, any jurisdictional claim based on fraudulent racial classification is void. Is the court denying this? Please respond so we know how to proceed. Note: it appears that the actions taken by the state of Colorado in this matter may actually be undermining their own dignity. By participating in the very fraud we are respectfully bringing to light. From the questionable handling of the August 1st summons to the valid October 2nd dismissal that has yet to receive a proper response, to the forged signature attached to the mandatory protection order, to the apparent removal of all substantive pages of a submission, to the arbitrary association of deceased individuals' names on a docket you claim belongs to Christopher Washington, the living soul, to the ambiguous denial stamp on documents without a clear explanation or legal justification, there are multiple serious issues aggregating. It raises the question: is this truly the court of the Republic of America? If not, your jurisdiction must be clarified. May we kindly request the appropriate credentials, including oaths and professional affiliations of the individuals within the state of Colorado who are currently handling this file? 2. Constitutional violation, Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Clause 2. The U.S. Constitution demands that all laws, treaties, and recognition of inherent rights be upheld as supreme. Any attempt to subvert those rights through fraudulent means is a direct violation of this clause. Fraud vitiates all contracts, meaning that any agreement or authority established through deception is invalid from the start. By attempting to classify Christopher Washington as black under color of law, a legal fiction designed to deprive Aboriginal Americans of their true status and rights, the court violates its duty to uphold supreme and valid legal standards. This fraudulent misclassification undermines the Constitution's authority and foundational legitimacy, don't it? 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The Equal Protection Clause guarantees that no individual or group will be discriminated against under the law. Dismissing the inherent birthrights of an Aboriginal American like Christopher Washington without transparent and fair due process is a breach of this constitutional mandate. The fraudulent actions taken, such as misclassifying him as black, a term rooted in legal constructs designed to strip away his rights, deny him equal treatment under the law, and violate the due process requirements for fair legal proceedings. We do not personally recognize the 14th Amendment as ratified, but you do. Your denial of Aboriginal status, his natal identity, qualified heirship, and inherent birthright violates these foundational principles, as the U.S. Constitution's legitimacy is partially rooted in acknowledging the sovereignty of pre-existing nations. Intersection of fraud and due process. We are clarifying to the court that failure to directly address the specific violations outlined here confirms its participation in a 572-year-long fraudulent claim, originating in 1452 and persisting into 2024. Fraud nullifies all legal actions. The deliberate classification of Christopher Washington as black erases his true status and undermines the court's jurisdiction from the outset. This fraudulent designation violates due process by denying his inherent birthright as an Aboriginal American. Due process is meant to prevent unjust actions. The court's refusal to acknowledge his status without presenting a legitimate and lawful contract directly contravenes these protections, leaving the proceedings tainted and without legal standing. Under the court's own framework, it is obligated to uphold due process, equal protection, and the Supremacy Clause. Refusing to address this foundational fraud only implicates the court further in its continuation spanning from 1452 to 2024. We would appreciate it if the court responded in an exacting manner as to whether it intends to deliberately ignore Christopher Washington's self-determined and proven birthright in order to potentially continue trafficking humans under the color of law guise. Notice of challenge to jurisdiction. 1. Evidence of contract and jurisdiction. The court must produce original documentation establishing jurisdiction over Christopher Washington. This includes but is not limited to a slave receipt of purchase, a slave ship manifest, any African designations on his family from initial censuses, 1790, an enslaved African maternal foremother, or any non-fraudulent document prior to 1452 that designates his family under color of law. These documents must predate his birthright and demonstrate a consensual contract under the court's authority. Without a valid contract, Christopher Washington's birthright as an Aboriginal American, predating the U.S. Constitution, remains intact and uncontested by your jurisdiction. Failure to provide due process. The inconsistent handling of submissions, failure to address motions, and the lack of transparency regarding the denial of critical documents all violate the court's obligation under the U.S. Constitution and common law. The court must demonstrate its lawful authority over Aboriginal Americans, recognizing the precedence of his inherent rights. Final demands for response. 1. Clarify basis for denials. Was the denial based on procedural or clerical errors, or does it represent a denial of Christopher Washington's inherent status and rights? Clarify the specific legal basis for the denial of documents regarding the recognition of root nation. 2. Provide proof of jurisdiction. If the court claims authority over Christopher Washington, provide explicit evidence of such jurisdiction. This evidence must be legally and lawfully valid, predate his inherent birthright, and not rely on fraudulent classifications or coerced statuses. 3. Rectify procedural errors. Address the inconsistencies in the case numbers and explain why unrelated names were linked to Christopher Washington's case. Transparency is required to avoid any appearance of procedural manipulation or jurisdictional overreach. Supporting definitions and context. 1. Nation. Defined as a unity of people with a shared identity, culture, and governance. The recognition of root nation aligns with this definition, which predates the U.S. Constitution. 2. Aboriginal refers to the original people of the land, whose existence and governance precede any foreign authority. 3. American historically refers to the copper-colored inhabitants of the land, the true inheritors of the land, as recognized by early treaties and descriptions. Conclusion. The court must address the issues raised without evasion. Any further attempts to deny or obscure Christopher Washington's inherent birthright as an Aboriginal American will be viewed as an ongoing violation of constitutional and international law, further compromising the legitimacy of this jurisdiction. The court's role is to uphold justice, not perpetuate historical injustices through procedural manipulation. Please respond with a reasonable time frame to these explicit points, backed by the full weight of applicable law and treaty obligations. Please note that no matter what format is entered, 2 unrecognized persons appear under the case number you provided. Once you provide a valid birthright contract, we can discuss this summons further. Please address the following concerns. 1. Distinction between Colorado State and the state of Colorado. There's a fundamental difference between Colorado as a geographic location, Colorado State, and state of Colorado as a corporate entity. The court appears to be operating under the latter, a corporate jurisdiction governed by UCC provisions rather than the initial common law writs. This shift indicates an attempt to bypass traditional due process by enforcing corporate statuses instead of lawful jurisdiction. 2. All caps ends leges. The use of all capital letters in reference to Christopher Washington's identity signals a move toward legal fiction, trafficking him under corporate jurisdiction rather than recognizing him as a living being with inherent rights. 3. B. Status classification. By designating Christopher Washington as a black, you reduce his status to a commercial and racial classification that historically implies commercial chattel enslavement and subjects him to corporate codes, thus stripping him of recognition as a free individual. This is a violation under color of law, signaling an attempt to claim his estate as abandoned. Social Security number use. The court's reliance on the Social Security number further substantiates that this is a commercial action, not a governmental one. Concerning his estate and your desire to place liens or other collections via debt peonage on his soul and probably securitize instruments that will adversely affect his estate and keep him in some forced impoverished situation and further traffic him, we can mention examples of this via case law and a special appearance. The SSN explicitly belongs to a corporate agency and is not the ownership of or affiliation with a living soul. This underscores that the jurisdiction being exercised is under a corporate and commercial framework, not one recognizing inherent or sovereign rights. 5. Absence of due process. Nowhere in the summons is Christopher Washington referred to as people. Instead, only terms like subject, defendant, and black are used, terms that are historically loaded with assumptions of guilt and human trafficking implications. This clearly bypasses any acknowledgement of his sovereignty or even personhood. 6. Signature under duress. The presence of an X before his signature indicates clear duress, suggesting that the signing was not voluntary. This compromises any claims of legal consent, invalidating the legitimacy of the summons. 7. Creation of defendant and victim. The roles of defendant and victim were created without due investigation, casting Christopher Washington as guilty from the outset. The compelled signature on the summons stating it is not an admission of guilt contrasts with the document's language, which presupposes guilt, underlined in the scanned summons herein. 8. UCC code compliance. Given the court's actions, Christopher Washington awakened to the nature of the trafficking exercise and invoked commercial codes via UCC provisions in his filings. It's evident that the court is functioning under commercial codes rather than the common law framework. This is an attempt to impose the false democracy of corporate statuses over Aboriginal sovereignty. 9. Jarvis's misconduct. Jarvis, number 18097, who signed the summons, acted deceptively by claiming Christopher Washington's wife did not provide a statement, despite his own request for her date of birth to log it. This behavior only further highlights the court's lack of integrity and due process. Weird. 10. Offense to the dignity of the people of the state of Colorado. The accusation that Christopher Washington has offended the dignity of the people of the state of Colorado is problematic. It conflates a corporate entity with sovereign people, using the term people to imply legitimacy under corporate definitions. This indicates an attempt to enforce slave codes under UCC provisions rather than recognizing Christopher Washington as an Aboriginal American with inherent birthright. The land cannot be sold or transferred as it is an inherited birthright, passed down through generational maternal lines, which predate any modern claims or jurisdictions. This birthright is inalienable, meaning it cannot be severed, sold, or extinguished by any external entity, particularly one that lacks consensual or legitimate agreements from the original people of said land. To assert authority, the state of Colorado must provide evidence of a consensual and legitimate transfer of land rights from the original custodians, one that respects the inherent sovereignty of Aboriginal Americans. Lacking such evidence, any claim of jurisdiction is not merely fraudulent, but constitutes a direct violation of inheritance laws, common law, and international standards protecting Indigenous rights. These birthrights are not subject to purchase or negotiation, as they're tied to the identity, culture, and blood lineage of the original peoples, which supersedes any subsequent corporate or governmental claims. Okay, so please provide evidence of any legitimate contract that grants the court authority over Christopher Washington, the living soul. Any reliance on fraudulent contracts or racial classifications nullifies the court's claims to jurisdiction. Thank you for allowing us this rite of passage and humbling learning experience in Colorado, a historic stomping ground for our people. You all are truly doing the Creator's work, and all of the tribes and original Americans on the land are appreciative that it is Colorado that chooses to make the almost 600-year-long fraud apparent to the world. We await your response and will add this to our public notice to all reclassified original organic tribes of Root Nation. Retaliation disclaimer. This correspondence is issued in good faith and in the pursuit of truth, transparency, and justice. Any form of retaliation, coercion, or adverse action taken as a direct or indirect response to the assertions and declarations made herein will be considered an infringement upon our rights, both protected and inherent, and will be met with appropriate legal and public remedies. Don't forget spiritual. This disclaimer serves as notice that any retaliatory actions will be documented, challenged, and made part of the public record. We reserve all our birthrights and open anyone within the Root Nation to resurrect this claim should we be interrupted, with the authority to assert that any interruption of our lives is intrinsically linked to our efforts in addressing and acknowledging a 572-year-long fraud that has trafficked our people. Please file this with the court and send confirmation of receipt at your earliest convenience. With kindness, Ever Council Matriarch Root Senekamaka Nations, heir unconditional without prejudice, UCC 1-308. Performance hereunder is with all rights reserved, non-assumptive, and does not recognize jurisdiction over living soul or establish consent to engage with ends leeches pursuant to UCC 3-402B1. Activist author for displaced tribes of the organic people of Earth, the colorful people of New Atlantis, Savage Girl, Goddess Gang, Savage Souls. All right, that's that. So that was filed today, October 25th, and we look forward to the court's response. We really do appreciate the Colorado courts for entertaining this matter. I mean, this is beautiful. And so that disclaimer, that retaliation disclaimer, if anything happens to myself and Chris, if anything happens to our families, if anything happens to any reclassified people on the land, now that this has been filed, you will be included at the soul level in this case, is what this is about. So I just want you to know that. So say, I'm sleeping good tonight and they take me out, you pick up this case file. That's what public notice is for. And you jump in it with the matriarchs who have also received it. The chiefs on the land will be spreading it around, and you just go ahead and take the case and you pick up. Everybody can do it. We are a hydra. We are a soul family. So it doesn't die, is what I'm saying. The case remains as is until we actually get some resolution and some recognition. Like I said, Colorado came for us. We did not come for Colorado. We did not come for Colorado. I came here for peace and to heal. And they actually just aggressed. And they've been, I'd say, passive aggressive in a number of ways, but we just pushed through it because we were actually told to come here by my uncle Johnny Running Deer Eliezer, who passed after we got here. He made sure we got here, and then he passed away. So he is the one who said to come over here for this particular moment in time and stand on the ground. And he was like, nobody listens. And I remember he called me just not long before he crossed over, and he was like, wow, you did it. You listened. And he remembered. He's like, how's Christopher? He remembered Christopher. He only met him once at powwow, and he was older. So it was really pretty amazing how many details he retained. And when a soul like that crosses over and knows your names and knows what you're working on, they are with you. Like he only left the body. You feel me? He's not left the grounds. So yeah, he was like, good, you guys made it. You're where you're supposed to be. That's perfect. And he knows the coordinates. He's drawn up the maps of what's going to happen on the land over the next 3,000 years. So, yep, that's why we're here. And it was just to work on our actual claims and clearing our names so that we can do our claims where we're from, which is actually Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. So that's what we were doing. And it just seemed like everything that could have possibly happened has happened in the world since we got to where we are. But we've maintained peace, and neither one of us are afraid because we haven't done anything wrong. And so what we're saying is, if something happens to us, you have to take it as an aggression on the reclassified people, period. It just is. It's not to be, you don't wait 500 years to find out who did it. It was them. And that's what this disclaimer is about. So you just pick this up immediately, whoever's the bravest and whoever gets it, because don't muck it up, okay? But whoever gets it, you pick up the baton and you resurrect this and you finish it up. And it will go on like that until it's done. And that's how I built this the wording. I do unspelling, and that's how I built this unspelling. So we are unspelling the spells that have been spelled. I almost sound like Hitler, didn't I? But yeah, that's what we're doing, and it's important. I come here at the end of the age to do that, and I download on purpose the language module on my way down here, down the Rainbow Bridge, to get here. I'm very, very old and very tired, and but have really appreciated being able to be a part of this. I didn't see this coming, but I know it is the turn time now. So I was aware. The ancestral body did tell me that it is that time now, and I know the date and the sequence of numbers of the age changing for next year in the 9. So the 9 is a very big time for us, and it also completes my first half of misery and my second half of heaven. So I'm ready to march forward, whether I'm in or out of body. I'm going to have a great time going forward from here, and I'm very appreciative of everybody who's made this work possible and everyone who's supporting this, whether you're in the spirit realm, beyond, or here with us on the land. We appreciate you. All the best and love to you all.